Today I'm going to show you how I make this homemade Capicolo. What's shaking, bacon? So this is homemade Capicolo. This is a meat you would use on a charcuterie board. You can buy it at lots of delis, especially Italian delis. So you cure this. It's a cured deli meat, and it's pork shoulder. It's specifically the copa muscle out of the pig shoulder. So if you go to a butcher counter and you ask for this, you just tell them you want to make Capicolo, and you want to tell them you want to trim the meat up yourself. You don't want a pre-trimmed piece of Capicolo. You want to do it yourself. So I ended up getting these pieces that I'm working on here because I ordered a pig shoulder, and in the pig shoulder they butcher it at the butcher shop and they grind all the pork into ground pork, and before they do that I ask them to take this muscle out. So I'm trimming it up myself here, and I want to get all that hard fat off. It's more like tendon than it is fat. It's pretty hard and dense, so we want to trim all that off, and this will give you a good idea of what the size is when you get one of these muscles from the butcher. If you see you get one that's like 2 or 3 inches shorter, that's not what you want. You want this full piece of Capicolo. It's got quite a few different names and different ways it's spelled depending on the region. It's something that traditionally gets cured in the winter. January is when pork typically goes on sale. You can buy pig shoulders at that point, and when that happens, you take this muscle out and then you cure it. Now, you would typically put it in a cold cellar or a garage, ideally a cold cellar, and this is what it looks like when it's done, when it's hung traditionally. So we're not going to do a traditional way, though. We're going to do this in a way that it can be done any time of the year. So the first step is curing the meat. So what I did here is I put the copa muscles in a container, and I used a kosher salt on it, and you could see how much I sprinkled it, and then it sits for about 5 days, and at that point the curing takes place. You're going to see a puddle of juice come out of it over a period of a couple days, and then after a while it's like it absorbs back into the meat or something, because when you go back and get it after a few days, the bottom of the container is bone dry. So this is the process of just making sure you're getting all the salt and all the grooves and everything. And you just want to give it time. There's lots of videos out there of people doing this exact process. Now, I didn't have a lid for this pan, so I just used saran wrap, and I used quite a few layers of saran wrap and kind of pushed a bit of the air out. It's a pretty easy process. It's kind of intimidating the first couple times you do it because you're like, oh, I don't want to poison myself. But really, you can go online and see lots of different people doing this, and the curing method's pretty similar. Now, some people measure out the salt beforehand depending on how much there is. I don't mind if my Capicolo comes out a little on the salty side, because people that eat it like to have it with bread, and I don't mind if on the salty side on its own. So I've taken the vinegar and I've poured it over the Capicolo and washed some of that salt off, and you just give it a bit of a rinse, and you can wipe it in there, but it's interesting. I've seen people online do it with wine. Now, this is the way my dad does his Capicolo too. So this is where I got it from. So I'm using cayenne pepper here, and I actually put more than my dad does on this. I think he's gotten a little light with it through the years. I still have all this ground pork, and I'm going to make some sausage with it. So I'm going to make some traditional sausage, and I'm going to cure some of that sausage. So I want to see how that works. We're going to be doing this in a different method than traditional casing, and we'll get into that later on. So it's this new casing that you can get that allows you to do it in your fridge any time of the year. So now I'm putting black pepper on here. And, if black pepper bothers you because of the oxalates, you can use white pepper. This is sort of a treat for me. I haven't tried it with white pepper, so I'm not sure how it's going to taste doing it with white pepper. But surprisingly, a little goes a long way. And don't forget, this is going to dehydrate in the fridge. So when I'm putting on this chili pepper here, Sometimes I get it coarse and like this, and other times I grind it down. I did put quite a bit on it, so I like my Capicolo on the spicier side. So that's it. It's cured in the salt, and then it's cayenne pepper, and then it's black pepper, and then chili pepper. So you want to make sure you get it in all the nooks and kind of evenly distributed. And now I'm putting it in these bags. These are called Umai bags, Umai. You can go online and do some research on these. And it's a bag, it looks like a regular bag, but it's not. And what this bag does is it allows airflow, so nothing comes in, but it lets moisture out because this meat needs to dehydrate. So you use this, that's called a little mouse pad. It's like a little rectangle of foam, and you put it in there. You want to crinkle the end of the bag, and you put it in a vacuum sealer, and you take the air out of the bag. And what I did here, before I put it in the bags, because of all that powder and all the seasoning on there, the outside of it gets a little dry. So I sprinkled it with water to help the bag connect with the meat. So I just took my fingers, dipped it in water, and sprinkled it quite a few times until I felt like it wasn't so dry. That helps you get a better seal with the bag wrapping around the meat. And you want to do this vacuum seal twice. No, actually not so much the vacuum seal twice. You do the vacuum seal once, but then you turn around and you do the heat seal twice. So there's me on the second one, and I'm just putting that in there. And you'll notice when I put this in there, this is a regular food storage vacuum sealer. When I pull it left and right, it doesn't really do too much. I had to actually grab the top of the bag and the bottom of the bag and separate it. And that's what allowed the air to get sucked out of that bag, because otherwise it wasn't really moving. And here's me going for that second round with it. This seems like it would be an intimidating process, but it's not. And that's an elastic casing I'm using around this. This is new for me. So normally at this point, you take that meat and you just put it on drying racks like you would baked goods on the counter. So the nice thing about these elastics is it's going to give it a round shape. Capicolo is traditionally round. Traditionally, when my dad and I hang it, he puts long sticks from the top to the bottom, like you saw in those photos in the beginning of the video, and he puts clamps around those sticks. And every couple days he goes and he just tightens those little clamps, and it pushes the sticks get tighter and tighter. So it keeps pressure on the Capicolo, and what that does is it helps kind of give it that rigid form that you see when those wooden sticks come off. But overall, it's a different way of doing this exact same thing. This is like an elastic that stretches over. It's a bit of a pain in the butt to do it this way. There are easier ways to do this, but what you do is you take this elastic band and you put it around a can, and you put it around the can, and then you got the one end tied off like I showed you in the beginning there, and then you feed the Capicolo through the can, and then that elastic goes right over the Capicolo really easy. So I'm doing it the difficult way here. I'm stretching it inch by inch over the Capicolo. But you'll see now that flat piece of meat is now round. And this is what it's like when you typically get Capicolo, when you see it at the butcher counter, when you go and get your mortadella and your other Italian cold cuts or ham or anything. So this is keeping pressure on it, and I like the shape. I really like the shape. I've never tried these before, but I've seen them used over and over again whenever I watch these videos. This is a more traditional way of doing this, and I'm going to hang these in my fridge. Now, being a carnivore, my fridge is almost always empty because I only have in my fridge any leftovers. So I actually don't really use my fridge that much. Lots of carnivores go through the same thing, especially if you're single. If you got a family, that's different. You're always going to have stuff in your fridge. If you have a second fridge in your house or a little beer fridge, this is something you can put in there and let it hang, and every day you go and check on it, and it's going to let the moisture in the fridge. So the problem with the fridge is there's not much moisture in the fridge, and you do want a little bit of humidity when you're making Capicolo. So opening the fridge a couple times a day is going to let that humidity in there, so you don't have to worry about that. And the way these bags work is it lets the moisture out but nothing back in. That's the Umai bags. That's the technology they boast. So I've used these before, and it came out pretty good, but I just did it on the cooling racks. And the Capicolo came out in a different shape, and it tasted good, but it came out sort of rectangular. Now, I like it round. Now, I'm tying the other end off because I'm going to hang it, so I'm a little off camera. Sorry about that. And you'll see I got them hanging in the fridge. Every day I'm going to flip this Capicolo from end to end. I'm going to have a better setup. Right now I just have some string. It's hanging from the top shelf because I just decided to do this today. And that's what it's going to look like when it's done. Now that's the traditional casing. That casing on that picture right there, that's an animal bladder, and it's pretty thick, and that's really tough to get the meat into. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to show you in a future video how all these came out. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks and take care.